Throughout history, from the golden age of boxing when we got to see Iron Mike and Holyfield duking it out, to the present day when MMA has taken the world by storm, the fight game's never been short on entertainment. Still, in 2017, a new wave of YouTuber boxing burst onto the scene, and exciting guys like Jake Paul began putting on a show. Let's look at some of the things he's been up to. First up, Jake Paul signs with the PFL. He's been on a journey for sure. The guy's forced us to respect him. We mean, think about it. He's genuinely committed to the fight game, and unlike so many of the other YouTubers taking part in boxing, he's not just in it for fun or the views. The thing is, this man is genuinely very rich, and he's got no need to put himself in situations where he'd get beaten to a pulp. He's got a very successful YouTube empire, and he could just focus on that if he wanted to. But he's been putting himself out there again and again, and he's fought some really dangerous guys. We all like to make fun of Tyron Woodley and Ben Askren, but they're both ex-MMA champs. No regular guy should be able to put them out like that. Yeah, we hear you. They're MMA guys, and Jake beat them in boxing despite both being retired. But we gotta give him the credit he deserves. We all doubted the guy in the beginning, sure. No one thought he'd stick around for very long. Well, shame on us, because the problem child just signed with the PFL, a legit MMA promotion with showings on ESPN and ESPN+. If there's ever gonna be a time to start taking Jake seriously, it's now. Following up, his deal with and role at the PFL. Now, it's impressive for sure that Paul has signed with the PFL, but we won't lie. It's kinda shady that he's also one of the majority stakeholders in the promotion. The guy's been accused of fixing every single fight he's ever won, and now, as one of the literal owners of the promotion he's set to fight in, we're sure the fight fans will find reasons to hate the guy. On the other hand, as an owner of the promotion, he's gone and promised that PFL fighters will receive a 50% cut of the PPVs they generate. Yeah, apparently he's decided to back up his criticisms of Dana White and the UFC's fighter pay issues. Again, we can't help but respect it. We're sure that the problem child and his fights will continue to be controversial, but one thing's for sure, the man's gonna make his MMA debut in 2023. And no matter how this new MMA stint turns out for the guy, no one can deny that along with all of the UFC's upcoming super fights, fans are gonna want to tune in for this PFL event, even if it's only to see whether this controversial YouTube star gets crushed into the dirt. But really, how good is Paul? Is he even a real fighter? Let's talk about it. Next up, a legit fighter and his chances in the octagon. As much as some fight fans don't want to hear this, Jake is a real fighter at this point. He's 100% committed, and the guy's putting in the hours. As we said before, he's fought some real killers. The guy's had 6 fights and 6 wins. Granted, some of those were against NBA players and other YouTubers, but come on, he's beaten MMA legends. When he took out Tyron via KO, the fans weren't satisfied, and rather than commend the guy, everyone started clowning on Woodley instead. That's not fair, guys. Woodley is a welterweight legend. But hey, even if that was just a fluke, the guy's beaten the wrestling demon Ben Askren as well. Alright. We hear some of you saying that these guys were MMA guys, and Jake beat them in a completely different sport. But what about Anderson Silva? The Spider was one of the greatest strikers in MMA. The guy's practically royalty in the fight game, and Jake beat him. Once again, critics could say that Silva got beaten when he was extremely old, but guys, even if it was an unfair matchup, the fact is, Paul has some skill that's allowing him to take on these veteran fighters and take them down. But these were ultimately all boxing matches. How would Paul do in an MMA bout? And who would he fight? Coming up, will he be able to keep up on the ground? And who will he fight? Alright, so clearly at this point, we've established that Jake's got some good stand-up, but as we all know, the ground game is key for MMA. But don't worry guys, the problem child's got that covered too. His brother's a state-level wrestler, and even though he doesn't have the same official credentials, the guy spent his high school years properly competing. Yeah, we all know how essential wrestling is to the MMA ground game. Honestly, this guy's background in competitive wrestling might be what sets him apart from all the other YouTubers who box. This guy's a genuine athlete. As for who he'd fight, well, Paul's gone straight for the biggest fish available. That's right, the man went and called out Nate Diaz. Next up, the call-out. This man's not messing around, and we might finally get to see him take on an active fighter. Now granted, Nate's at the tail end of his career, but the guy's a beast, and he's the cream of the crop when it comes to MMA. If we're being honest, we don't see Paul winning this one, but the guy's smart, and he didn't just call Diaz out to an MMA bout. Apparently, this crazy savage wants to box first, and then 6 months later, step into the PFL octagon. This could work out great for him, because even if Nate destroys him in the MMA match, Paul's got a good chance in the boxing ring. At this point, it's important to remember that his rival hasn't accepted, but if he does, this fight will be one of the biggest PPVs of 2023, maybe even all time. Yeah, you can bet Dana's not happy about this. Alright, we've told you what we think about Jake signing to the PFL, but what do you guys think other fighters' reactions were? Let's take a look. Coming up, fighters react to Jake Paul signing to the PFL. If you expected fighters to to stay quiet as this is huge news, think again, because voices from all over the MMA world rose to talk about his recent move. With every fight he's been involved with, he's been calling out Dana and all sorts of fighters in the UFC. The guy's been marketing himself hard. So it's no surprise the MMA world has been deeply invested in this guy, even if it's just because people want to see him lose, especially when he started KOing MMA guys. Yeah, you can bet no one liked seeing what happened to the great Anderson Silva. Anyway, despite his rocky relationship with the MMA world, the reaction to this move has largely been positive. Fighters have especially appreciated Paul's commitment to paying PFL athletes 50% of the PPV amount, like Kyle Daukaus, who tweeted out saying it's getting difficult to dislike the guy. Apparently, Paul's gutsy move to the PFL has put him in a lot of fighters' good books. Fighters like Darren Wynn and Jeremy Stevens have tweeted welcoming the fighter to the PFL, and others like Shane Burgos have expressed the desire to take the YouTube star on. Even the UFC's Derek Brunson tweeted out, saying the signing reveal video was a banger. That's not all though, guys. There's one other big name in the MMA world who reacted to the news. Want to know who? Stay tuned. Following up, a big name in MMA responds to Jake's move to the PFL. That's right, we're talking about the ex-UFC lightweight champ, Anthony Pettis. Not only did this veteran of the game welcome the problem child to the PFL, but he also offered to step into the octagon with him. This is big, especially considering that he's already signed to the PFL. Now, we're not saying this fight would be bigger than Paul versus Diaz. No, that fight has the potential to be an all-time high PPV. But in case that doesn't happen, Jake now has an ex-UFC champ in the PFL who could take Nate's place. This all but confirms that whatever ends up happening, one of the biggest MMA events of 2023 will be hosted by the PFL. Yup, this new signing is bringing a lot of eyes to the promotion, and even though this is no threat to the UFC's monopoly, we can't help but notice that the UFC head honcho Dana isn't having a great time. Finally, White's having a rough time with Paul's latest move. Alright, so we all know how the UFC has had no real competitors in over a decade. They've completely taken over, and even though Bellator looked like it was going to give them some trouble at the end of 2022, the UFC remains supreme. Of course, this doesn't mean things can't happen that'll affect the promotion's profits or annoy Dana. That's right, with this huge news, the PFL is on everyone's minds as 2023 begins, and what was supposed to be the UFC's greatest year might end with one of the biggest fights being held by another promotion. It's not even an exaggeration, guys. Even with Conor's return and Jones versus Ngannou, if the PFL markets Paul's debut right, and if Diaz somehow jumps on board, well, we might be on the cusp of one of the biggest fights in MMA history. Think about it. This guy, an amateur YouTube boxer that no one thought was going to stick around, has the 12th highest PPV selling fight in all of boxing history. Now imagine if another PPV star, Nate Diaz, stepped in there with him. Yeah, it'd be insane. Given everything going on with Dana these last few weeks, like the whole wife-slapping business and the problems with his slap league, it makes sense what Ben Askren tweeted in response to this whole situation. He's definitely not having an amazing time. But hey, we're happy for Jake, and as long as the guy's giving us entertainment, we're not complaining. That's it for this one, guys. What do you think about Jake's chances in the octagon? Let us know in the comments below, and as always, like and subscribe. See you guys in the next one.